The moment I understood I had already been replaced came at 6:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, standing in my parents' kitchen, holding a casserole dish no one had asked me to bring. My mother didn't look at me when she said it. "We already talked to Claire about handling the paperwork," she said, stirring sauce on the stove. "She's better with these things now. Claire is my younger sister. I'm Naomi Prescott. I'm 32 years old, and I had been handling these things for nearly a decade." I didn't argue. I didn't ask what paperwork. I didn't remind her that I had managed our family business finances since I was 23, or that I'd been the one fixing mistakes quietly while everyone else slept. I just nodded and set the dish down. That was the first small thing, the kind you're supposed to ignore. Our family business wasn't glamorous. Prescott Event Holdings, venues, rentals, weddings, corporate parties. It had been built, brick by my parents, and then maintained by me. Not officially, of course. On paper, my father was president. My mother handled client relations. Claire did marketing. I did everything else: accounting, contracts, vendor disputes, permits, crisis calls at midnight when a venue flooded or a bride panicked. I wasn't listed as an executive. I was listed as support. I had accepted that for years because it came with an unspoken promise. Someday, equity, someday recognition, someday when things settled. They never did. At dinner that night, my father announced Claire's engagement. Everyone clapped. My mother cried. Champagne appeared. Claire held up her hand, laughing, glowing. "I can't believe it's happening." I smiled. Genuinely. I loved my sister. Or at least I thought I did. "We're thinking of a fall wedding," my mother said immediately. "At the Hawthorne venue. Our most profitable property." "Of course," Claire said. "Mom said we could use it at cost." I felt something tighten in my chest. At cost meant free. I had been the one who fought to keep that venue solvent after the pandemic, negotiated leases, deferred taxes, reworked contracts. But I said nothing. Then my father added casually, "We'll need to reorganize some things before the wedding. Clean things up. Make sure ownership is simple." Ownership. I looked up. "What do you mean?" He waved a hand. "Just structure. Estate planning. You know." I did know. I knew that phrase. I'd used it myself when cleaning up messes for clients who didn't want to talk about uncomfortable truths. Claire reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Don't worry, Nye. You're always the strong one. You'll be fine." There it was, the sentence that had followed me my entire life. "You're fine." It meant you don't need explaining. You don't need choosing. You don't need asking. After dinner, while everyone talked wedding colors and guest lists, I slipped into the den and opened my laptop. Old habit, comfort reflex. I pulled up the company drive. Documents I'd organized meticulously over years. Folders labeled clearly. Audit trails. Notes. Something was different. Permissions denied. I refreshed. Tried again. A new admin name appeared. Claire Prescott. I stared at the screen, heart steady, mind oddly clear. They hadn't told me. They hadn't asked. They had just done it. I closed the laptop and sat back, listening to the muffled laughter from the kitchen. My family, my workplace. The same room, the same people, the same silence. That night, my mother knocked on the guest room door. "We're so proud of you," she said. "You handle things so well." I smiled politely. She hesitated. "You're not upset, are you?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm paying attention." She didn't understand the difference. The next morning, I went to work early. Earlier than usual. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't ask questions. I observed. Emails rerouted. Meetings scheduled without me. Claire CC'd where I used to be primary. My father speaking on calls with confidence he hadn't had in years, reading from notes I recognized as my own. By noon, I understood something I hadn't let myself think before. They weren't pushing me out angrily. They were replacing me gently. That's what hurt the most. At 2:17 p.m., a client called in a panic about a contract clause Claire had overlooked. I fixed it in 10 minutes, sent the revised version, saved the deal. No one thanked me. At 4:03 p.m., my mother forwarded an email. Claire will handle this moving forward. I stared at the words until they blurred slightly. I wasn't losing my job. I was losing my position inside the family. That evening, I didn't stay late. For the first time in years, I shut my computer down at 5 and walked out. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not sadness, a quiet, unsettling awareness. I had been useful. I had been loyal. I had been silent. And it still wasn't enough. That was when the open loop formed in my mind, the question that wouldn't let go. If love disappears, the moment you stop being useful, was it ever love at all? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew with certainty that this was no longer about a wedding or paperwork or Claire. This was the beginning of something being taken from me. And whether they realized it or not, they had just taught me the most important lesson of my life. If I didn't choose myself soon, someone else would choose for me, and they already had. Once you notice the shift, it's impossible to pretend you don't feel it. The week after that dinner moved differently. Not louder, quieter, like a house where someone has rearranged the furniture while you were sleeping and your body keeps reaching for things that aren't there anymore. I stopped being copied on emails that used to land in my inbox first. Vendor replies came slower, then not at all. Claire began using phrases I recognized from my own old drafts, but without the context that made them work. I didn't correct her. I watched. At Wednesday's operations meeting, I took my usual seat and opened my notebook. My father stood at the head of the table, clearing his throat like he always did when he wanted authority to sound natural. Claire will be leading logistics from now on, he said. Naomi will assist as needed. Assist. That word landed heavier than I expected. I didn't look up. I didn't react. I just wrote the word down in my notebook and underlined it once. Claire smiled at me across the table. Nervous, excited, a little guilty. You've taught me everything, she said quickly. Like that made it better. I met her eyes. Then you won't need me. The room went quiet for half a second too long. My mother jumped in. Of course she will. Your family. Family. The word they used when they wanted labor without leverage. After the meeting, Claire followed me down the hallway. I didn't ask for this, she said. I know, I replied. You're not mad, right? I stopped walking. Why would I be mad? She hesitated. Because they didn't really explain it to you. They didn't explain it at all, I said calmly. But that's not your responsibility. She exhaled, relieved. Good. I hate conflict. I nodded. I know. That afternoon, I pulled a random file from the archive. One of the early contracts from before Claire even worked here. My name wasn't on it. It never had been. But the handwritten notes in the margins were unmistakably mine. I realized then how easy it had been to erase me. All they had to do was stop saying my name. The next escalation came quietly, the way all the worst ones do. On Friday morning, my father called me into his office. The door closed softly behind me. He gestured for me to sit. We're streamlining, he said. It's better for the company. I waited. You've been carrying a lot, he continued. This will free you up. For what I asked, he frowned slightly. For life. You don't have to be so involved anymore. There it was. Not a demotion, a dismissal disguised as care. I didn't ask to be freed, I said. He sighed. You always take things personally. No, I replied. I take them accurately. His jaw tightened. You're reading into this. I'm reading what's in front of me, I said. My access has changed. My role has changed. My authority has disappeared. You're still part of the family, he said. That's not an answer, I replied. He leaned back in his chair. Naomi, your sister, is getting married. This is a big moment for her. We want things to be smooth. Smooth. That was the priority. Does smooth require me stepping aside? I asked. He didn't answer directly. You're resilient. You always have been. I stood. Then you'll be fine without me. He looked startled. That's not what I meant. It's what you said, I replied. I left his office without waiting for permission. That evening, my mother sent me a text. Don't overthink this. We love you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Love that asks you not to think is never love. It's control. I didn't reply. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a new document and titled it simply Records. I began copying things. Quietly. Legally. Documents I had created. Emails where decisions were deferred to me. Messages asking for my input at all hours. I wasn't planning anything yet. I was just making sure reality existed somewhere outside my head. Saturday night, Claire came over with a wedding binder under her arm. I need your help, she said, sitting at my kitchen table. Venues, vendors, timelines. I don't know how you keep all this straight. I poured us tea and sat across from her. You'll figure it out, I said. She blinked. You're not going to help. I didn't say that, I replied. I said you'll figure it out. She bit her lip. Mom said you'd be happy to handle the back end. There it was again. Assumptions dressed up as expectations. I'm not handling anything I'm not authorized for, said calmly. She stared at me. But you always do. I always did, I corrected. That's different. She looked hurt. This feels unfair. I held her gaze. So does being replaced without a conversation. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I need time, she said finally. So do I replied. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment and let the quiet settle. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't breaking. I was recalibrating. The next week, the first real consequence landed. A vendor sent a contract with errors. Claire missed them. My father signed anyway. The mistake cost the company $12,000. No one blamed me. They just looked confused. How did this slip through my mother? Asked in the hallway. I shrugged. I wasn't reviewing it. Her face changed slightly. Not anger. Something closer to fear. That was when I understood something critical. They hadn't planned for my absence. They had planned for my silence. And now that I was no longer filling the gaps, the structure they'd built on my quiet competence was starting to show cracks. I went home that night and opened my laptop again. Not to work, to search. Family business attorney near me. For the first time, the idea didn't feel dramatic. It felt necessary. Because what was happening wasn't emotional. It was strategic. And if they were reorganizing without me, I needed to understand exactly what that meant before they decided the rest of my future without asking. The attorney's office smelled like coffee that had been reheated too many times and paper that had lived a long life. It felt oddly comforting. Neutral ground. Her name was Elaine Porter, early 60s. Gray hair pulled back tightly. No wasted movements. She listened, without interrupting, while I explained. Not just what had happened, but how it had happened. The quiet shifts. The permissions revoked. The language my parents used that sounded caring until you listened closely. When I finished, she folded her hand. And they're restructuring control without formally removing you, she said. That's intentional. So I'm not imagining it, I replied. No, she said. You're being sidelined. I exhaled slowly. What does that mean legally? I asked. It means if you do nothing, the story becomes that you stepped back voluntarily, she said. And that story hardens over time. I nodded. That's what they're doing. Elaine slid a yellow legal pad toward me. We need to establish facts, not feelings, dates, documents, decisions. I thought of the folder I'd started, the emails, the access logs. I have those, I said. She smiled faintly. Good. Most people wait until it's too late. I left her office with a list of next steps and something else I hadn't expected. Relief. Not because things were fixed, because they were finally named. At work, the atmosphere shifted further. Claire began holding meetings without inviting me. When I walked past the conference room, I could hear my own old language echoing back at me, stripped of nuance. My father started asking questions he hadn't asked in years. Why is this permit delayed? Who approved this vendor? Why is the margin lower here? Claire answered as best she could. Sometimes she glanced at me silently, asking for help. I didn't intervene. I wasn't being petty. I was being accurate. On Thursday afternoon, my mother cornered me near the printer. "You could help her," she said quietly. "This is stressful for Claire." "So was running the entire back end for years without authority," I replied. She frowned. "This isn't the same." "It is," I said. "You just didn't feel it." She opened her mouth, then closed it. That evening, Claire called me. "I feel like I'm failing," she said, voice tight. "Everyone keeps looking at me like I should know things." I sat on my couch phone pressed to my ear. "That feeling is information," I said, "not an indictment." She was quiet. "I didn't realize how much you handled," she said. I believed her, but realization didn't undo replacement. "I need you," she added. I closed my eyes. "You need training," I said, "and authority, and time." "And you," she said softly. "I can't be the solution to a structure designed to erase me," I replied. She didn't argue. She just sounded tired. The next escalation came from a place I hadn't expected. The bank. I received an automated alert that my name had been removed from an account I'd had access to for years. A secondary authorization, yes, but one I'd relied on for daily operations. I forwarded the notice to Elaine. Her reply came back almost immediately. "That's significant. They're consolidating financial control." I stared at the screen. That night, my father called. "Why are you involving lawyers?" he asked, skipping pleasantries. "I'm getting clarity," I replied. "This doesn't need to be adversarial," he said. "It already is," I said calmly. "You just didn't expect me to notice." He sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I replied. "I'm making it accurate." There was a pause. "You've always been sensitive," he said finally. I felt something inside me go still. "No," I said. "I've been observant. You just preferred when I didn't speak." Silence stretched. "I didn't raise you to threaten the family," he said. "I'm not threatening anyone," I replied. "I'm protecting myself." He hung up. The next morning, I came into work to find my desk cleared. Not emptied, just neutralized. Personal items gone. Files relocated. My name removed from the door. I stood there for a long moment taking it in. No announcement, no conversation. Just erasure. Claire found me 10 minutes later, pale. "I didn't know they were doing that," she said. "I know," I replied. She swallowed. "What are you going to do?" I looked at her. Really looked. "You don't need to worry about me," I said. "You need to decide what you're willing to inherit." She flinched. That afternoon, I emailed Elaine. "They've physically removed me. What's next?" Her reply was measured. "Now we formalize your position, or your exit." I sat back in my chair, hands steady. For the first time since all this began, the path ahead felt clear. Not easy. Clear. At home that night, I opened my laptop and drafted a letter. Not a resignation. A request for written clarification of my role, authority compensation, and future stake in the company. A deadline included. Professional. Calm. I sent it to my parents and CC'd the company's general counsel. I didn't feel fear when I clicked send. I felt resolve, because silence had been their greatest weapon, and clarity was mine. The response didn't come that night, or the next morning, but I knew it would, because once you stop absorbing pressure quietly, the people who benefited from your silence have to respond, one way or another, and whatever came next, I would meet it without shrinking. That much, at least, I had already reclaimed. They waited 4 days to respond. That delay was intentional. If you make someone wait long enough, they start questioning their own nerve. They soften. They reconsider. They apologize just to restore movement. I didn't. By the 4th day, the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt informative. On Friday afternoon, An email finally arrived from my father. Short, formal, carefully neutral. Let's discuss this in person. Monday at 10 a.m. No answers. No acknowledgement of my questions. Just a summons. I forwarded it to Elaine. Her reply was one line. Do not attend without representation. I stared at the screen, then typed back. I don't want this to turn into a fight. Elaine's response came quickly. It already is. You just haven't raised your voice. Monday morning, I didn't go to the office. At 9:58 a.m., my phone rang. Where are you? My mother asked, tension sharp in her voice. I'm not coming in, I said. What do you mean you're not coming in? She snapped. Your father cleared his schedule. I asked for written clarification. I replied calmly. I didn't ask for a closed-door conversation. This is family, she said. No, I said. This is business. You made that clear when you removed my access. Silence. You're being dramatic, she said finally. I'm being precise, I replied. She hung up. 10 minutes later, a new email arrived. This one from the company's general counsel. It attached a document titled Revised Role Outline. I opened it slowly. The language was clean, polished, professional, and devastating. My role was now advisory only. No decision-making authority. No financial access. No equity pathway. Compensation unchanged. Expectations undefined. In short, I was expected to remain available without influence. They had answered my questions, just not in the way they thought I would accept. I printed the document and took it to Elaine's office that afternoon. She read it once, then again. They're offering you the illusion of inclusion, she said. Without power. I know, I replied. She leaned back. The question is whether you accept that. I shook my head. No. Then we prepare for separation, she said. And we do it on your terms. I exhaled slowly. I don't want to burn everything down. You don't have to, she said. You just have to stop holding it up. The next step wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. Elaine drafted a formal response, declining the revised role and requesting negotiation of a separation agreement, including severance, release from non-compete clauses, and recognition of my intellectual contributions to the company's systems. We sent it that evening. The reply came the next morning, anger barely disguised. This feels hostile. We are disappointed. We expected more loyalty. Loyalty. The word that had kept me quiet for years. I didn't respond. That afternoon, Claire came to my apartment unannounced. She looked overwhelmed. Not angry, not defensive, just scared. They're panicking, she said, as soon as she stepped inside. Dad's furious. Mom's crying. They think you're attacking them. I'm not, I replied. They don't see it that way. I know, I said. They never have. She sat down heavily on my couch. I didn't want this, she said. I believe you, I replied. She rubbed her temples. I can't do what you did. I don't know how. That's not your failure, I said. It's the structures. She looked at me, eyes glossy. What if everything falls apart? I considered her question carefully. Then it was already unstable, I said. She swallowed. You're really leaving? Yes, I said. She nodded slowly. I don't know how to be your sister without the company. You'll learn, I said. Or you won't. Either way, I can't stay to make it easier. She stood, hesitated, then hugged me quickly, like someone afraid I might disappear if she held on too long. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment and let myself feel the weight of what I'd chosen. Not grief, responsibility. The next escalation came from an unexpected direction. The Hawthorne venue, a property I had personally refinanced 3 years earlier under a complex structure that allowed deferred payments and favorable tax treatment. It was still listed under the parent company, but the documentation bore my signature as the architect of the deal. Elaine noticed it immediately when reviewing my files. This is leverage, she said. Is it mine, I asked. It's influence, she replied. And influence matters. 2 days later, the bank contacted the company, requesting clarification on recent internal changes. They wanted reassurance that the person who had structured the financing was still involved. My father called me within an hour. "We need you on this call," he said. "I'm not authorized," I replied. "You know how sensitive this is," he said. "Yes," I said. "That's why I warned you not to sideline me without a plan." He lowered his voice. "Name what you want." There it was. Not an apology. A transaction. "I want a clean exit," I said. Severance. No non-compete. A formal acknowledgement of my work. "And the bank?" he asked. "They'll get their reassurance," I said. "From your new structure." Silence. "You're forcing our hand," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm removing mine." The call ended without resolution. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Because the fear was gone. They had shown me exactly how they saw me, and I had finally believed them. Whatever came next would hurt, but it wouldn't confuse me, and that more than anything told me I was moving in the right direction. The waiting ended on a Tuesday morning, the kind that feels ordinary until it isn't. I was halfway through a cup of coffee when Elaine called. "They've agreed to negotiate," she said. "Not because they understand, because they're exposed." I closed my eyes briefly. "What changed?" "The Hawthorne financing," she replied. "The bank wants continuity. They don't trust a handoff built on assumptions." Of course they didn't. Assumptions were what my family specialized in. We met that afternoon. Elaine spread the documents across her desk, precise and methodical. She didn't dramatize. She didn't soften. "They want you quiet," she said, "and they want you gone." "I can do quiet," I replied. "Gone too." She looked at me over her glasses. Then we set terms that make silence fair. The proposal we drafted was simple and firm. A severance tied to years of service. Release from non-compete and non-solicitation clauses. Written acknowledgement of my role in building internal systems and securing the Hawthorne deal. A clean break date. No apologies, no emotional language, just facts and outcomes. Elaine sent it before the end of the day. The reply came 3 hours later, sharper this time. "This is excessive. You're leveraging family relationships. This is not how we raised you." I read it once, then forwarded it to Elaine. Her response was a single sentence. "They're negotiating in feelings. We stay in reality." The next day, my mother called me for the first time since I declined the meeting. Her voice was brittle, controlled. "You're humiliating us," she said. "I'm protecting myself," I replied. "Do you know what people are saying?" she asked. "I'm sure," I said. "It doesn't change the facts." "You could have handled this privately," she insisted. "I tried," I said. "You removed my access instead." She was quiet for a moment. "Your sister is struggling." "I know," I replied. "So am I. The difference is I'm allowed to struggle now." "You're tearing the family apart," she said. "No," I replied. I stopped holding it together alone. She hung up. At work, the atmosphere turned brittle. People avoided my eyes. Conversations stopped when I walked past. My presence had become inconvenient, a reminder of instability they didn't want to acknowledge. I didn't linger. At noon on Thursday, my father called again. "We'll agree to severance," he said, voice tight. "But the acknowledgement is unnecessary." "It isn't," I replied. "It's factual." "It opens us up," he said. "To truth," I replied. Silence. "And the non-compete," he asked. "I won't sign one," I said. "You'll destroy us," he snapped. "No," I replied calmly. "I'll compete." Another silence, heavier this time. "We'll get back to you," he said. That evening, Claire showed up again. She looked exhausted, older somehow. "They're blaming you for everything," she said. "Every mistake, every delay." I nodded. "That's familiar." She sat at my table, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. "I didn't want your life," she said suddenly. "I wanted their approval." I looked at her. Really looked. "They're not the same thing," I said. She swallowed. "What if I can't do this?" "You don't have to answer that right now," I replied. "Just don't lie to yourself." She nodded, eyes wet. "I wish I'd asked more questions." "So, I said. "But wishing doesn't build exits." She left quietly. The following Monday, Elaine called me early. They've accepted most terms, she said. Severance approved. Non-compete removed. And the acknowledgement I asked. They want to soften it, she replied. But they'll include it. I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief. Confirmation. Set the signing, I said. The signing took place in a neutral office downtown. No family photos, no memories embedded in the walls. My parents sat across from me. Elaine beside me. Their attorney beside them. No one smiled. The documents were passed across the table. I read every page carefully. Initialed where required. Signed when ready. No one rushed me. When I finished, I slid the pen back. That's it, the attorney said. My father cleared his throat. We never meant to hurt you. I looked at him. I know, I said. You meant to manage me. He flinched. My mother's eyes filled with tears. You're still our daughter. I always was, I replied. Even when you didn't act like it. I stood. Elaine stood with me. We left without shaking hands. Outside, the air felt colder, cleaner. Elaine walked me to the curb. You handled that well, she said. I handled it accurately, I replied. She smiled faintly. That's better. That night, I went home and packed a box of things from my office. Not everything, just what mattered. A notebook, a framed photo from before the business consumed us, a plant I'd somehow kept alive through years of neglect. I didn't feel sad. I felt unburdened. The next morning, my access badge didn't work. No surprise. I left it on the front desk and walked out without looking back. At noon, an email went out to staff announcing my departure. Polite, vague, thanking me for my contributions. No specifics. That was fine. The truth existed elsewhere now. On paper, in accounts, in my name. By the end of the week, I had 3 calls from competitors. Quiet inquiries, careful interest. They knew what I'd built. They knew what my family had lost. I took none of them yet. I wasn't running. I was choosing. That weekend, I sat alone in my apartment and felt something unfamiliar bloom. Space, not emptiness. Possibility. Whatever came next would be mine. And the people who had mistaken my silence for weakness would have to live with the consequences of discovering it was discipline instead. The table hadn't flipped, but the weight had shifted. And it wasn't shifting back. The quiet after leaving felt louder than the chaos I'd lived in. For the first few days, I kept expecting an emergency call, a frantic text, someone needing me to fix something they'd already broken. My body was trained for urgency, even when my life no longer required it. Nothing came. I woke up Monday morning without an alarm and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the light coming through the window. It took me a full minute to realize I didn't have to check my phone. No one was waiting. No one was counting on my silence. That should have felt good immediately. Instead, it felt unfamiliar. By Wednesday, the messages started trickling in, but not from my parents, from former vendors, from a venue manager who didn't know who to send invoices to anymore, from a contractor asking if a change order was really approved, from a bank representative who sounded polite but uneasy. I gave them all the same answer. I'm no longer with the company. Some of them paused, others apologized. A few sounded relieved, as if they'd been holding their breath for years. That told me more than I wanted to know. On Thursday afternoon, Elaine called. They're struggling, she said, not unkindly. Operationally. I expected that, I replied. They're asking if you'd be willing to consult. Short term. Paid. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Through you, I asked. Yes, she said. They won't contact you directly. At least, not yet. I closed my eyes. No, I said. Elaine didn't argue. I figured. That night, Claire texted me. It's worse than I thought. I read it, put the phone down, picked it back up. Do you want advice or support? I asked. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I don't know, she finally wrote. I typed slowly. I can't be the safety net anymore. But I can tell you this. You're allowed to say no to them too. There was a long pause. I didn't expect a response. At the end of the week, I met with a recruiter I'd been avoiding. Her name was Paula Green. She'd been reaching out for years, always politely, always patient. We met for coffee downtown. Neutral, easy. "You look different," she said after a few minutes. "Different how?" I asked. "Like someone who stopped holding their breath," she replied. I smiled faintly. "That's accurate." She slid a folder across the table. "I have 3 opportunities I think you should consider. All outside family businesses." I flipped through the pages slowly. Event logistics for a national hospitality group. Operations director for a nonprofit arts foundation. Consulting role for a private equity firm acquiring distressed venues. Each one came with structure, authority, compensation spelled out in writing. "No, someday." "I don't need to rush," I said. "I know," Paula replied. "That's why now is the best time." That weekend, my parents' house hosted an engagement party for Claire. I wasn't invited. I found out through social media. Photos of smiling faces, toasts, decorations I recognized from my own vendor lists. The absence didn't sting the way I expected. It clarified. Monday morning, my father finally called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Naomi," he said. His voice sounded tired. "Things are complicated." "I'm sure," I replied. "We didn't realize how much you handled," he said. I waited. "We're asking for temporary help," he continued. "Just until things stabilize." "Stabilize how?" I asked. He hesitated. "Until after the wedding. Until the transition settles." I pictured it clearly. Me stepping back in quietly, fixing things, absorbing stress, being thanked with relief, not change. "No," I said. "You're punishing us," he snapped. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm respecting myself." He exhaled sharply. "This isn't how families work." "This is exactly how they work. When one person does all the work," I said. Silence stretched between us. "You've changed," he said. "Yes," I replied. "Because I had to." He hung up without saying goodbye. That night, Claire called. She sounded raw. "They keep comparing me to you," she said. "Every mistake, every delay. They say you never struggled like this." I felt a familiar ache. Not anger, recognition. "I struggled," I said. "I just did it quietly." "I don't know how you survived," she whispered. "I didn't," I replied. "I endured." "There's a difference." She cried then, softly, not dramatically. "I don't want your life," she said. "I want mine." "That's the first honest thing you've said," I replied. "Hold on to it." After we hung up, I sat in the dark and thought about something Elaine had said earlier that week. "You don't have to punish them. Reality will do that on its own." She was right. The company wasn't failing because I left. It was failing because it had been built to depend on one person's silence. And now that silence was gone, by the end of the month, I accepted a role. Not with urgency, with intention. Operations director for the hospitality group. National scope. Clear reporting lines. A team instead of expectations. On my first day, my new boss shook my hand and said, "We hired you because you see what others miss, but we won't ask you to carry it alone." I believed him. That evening, I walked home under a sky that felt wider than it had in years. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I was building something that didn't require me to disappear to survive. And somewhere behind me, a system that had relied on my quiet compliance was beginning to collapse under the weight it should have been carrying all along. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, and that freedom was only just beginning to show its consequences. Freedom has a way of testing you after it arrives, not with temptation, but with doubt. The first month at my new job was steady in a way that felt almost unreal. Meetings had agendas. Decisions were documented. When I said no, it was accepted without negotiation or guilt. When I flagged a risk, it was addressed, not minimized. No one asked me to absorb chaos quietly. That should have been enough to quiet the voice in my head that asked if I'd overreacted. It wasn't. That voice resurfaced the morning my mother showed up at my apartment. I hadn't given her my new schedule. She must have guessed. She stood in the hallway, holding a folder, her coat still on, eyes sharp with purpose. "We need to talk," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. Not because I owed her access, because I wasn't afraid of the conversation anymore. She didn't sit. "They're saying you're refusing to help," she said. "I am," I replied. She frowned. "That's not like you." "I know," I said. She opened the folder and spread documents across my kitchen table. Vendor notices, penalty clauses, a bank letter marked urgent. "They're in trouble," she said. "Real trouble." I glanced at the papers without touching them. "This isn't my responsibility," I said. "You built this," she snapped. "You can't just walk away." I met her gaze. I didn't walk away. I was pushed. "That's not how we see it," she said. "I know," I replied. "That's the problem." She softened her tone, the way she always did when anger didn't work. "We're family," she said. "Families don't abandon each other." I waited until the silence forced her to continue. "You could consult," she said. "Just temporarily. We'll pay." There it was again. The assumption that compensation replaced respect. "No," I said. Her mouth tightened. "You're enjoying this." "No," I replied. "I'm choosing not to be harmed again." She shook her head slowly. "You're punishing us." I thought about my sleepless nights, the years of invisibility, the moment my access disappeared without a word. "No," I said. "I'm letting consequences land where they belong." She gathered the papers with stiff movements. "You think this makes you strong," she said. "I think it makes me whole," I replied. She left without another word. That afternoon, Elaine called. "They've escalated," she said. "They're threatening to claim you withheld proprietary knowledge." I felt a flicker of irritation, then calm. "On what basis?" I asked. "None that will hold," she replied. "But they're hoping fear will bring you back to the table." "It won't," I said. "Good," she replied. "Because now we go on record." Elaine drafted a formal response outlining the separation agreement, the limits of my obligations, and the fact that any knowledge I'd created was documented and transferred before my departure. It was clean, precise, unemotional. It also closed a door. The next call came from Claire. She sounded different, quieter, less frantic. "I think I'm going to step back," she said. I didn't interrupt. "They're blaming me for everything," she continued, "and comparing me to you like it's a competition I never agreed to enter." I leaned against my kitchen counter listening. "I thought replacing you would make them see me," she said. "It didn't." "No," I replied. "It never does." "I don't know who I am outside of this," she admitted. "That's not something they can give you," I said. "Or take." She was silent for a long moment. "Are you happier?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "I'm steadier," I said. "And that feels like happiness used to, before everything got complicated." She exhaled slowly. "I'm scared." "I know," I replied. "But fear isn't a reason to stay somewhere that erases you." She didn't respond right away. When she did, it was soft. "I wish I'd protected you." I closed my eyes briefly. "So do I said. "But we're here now." The real twist came 2 weeks later. Asaz.
Betrayal on my song.
Not addressed to the company, addressed to me. I opened it slowly, heart steady. They were requesting clarification on a personal guarantee tied to the Hawthorne venue refinancing. My signature was on the original structure. The guarantee had never been fully released. Elaine confirmed it the same day. They assumed you'd always be there, she said. They never cleaned it up. I stared at the letter. So I'm still legally connected, I said. Yes, she replied. But this works in your favor. How, I asked. They can't restructure or sell without resolving it, she said. And the bank trusts you. I sat back, absorbing the implications. This wasn't leverage I'd sought. It was leverage created by years of responsibility no one had bothered to formalize. My father called that evening, his voice tight. The bank contacted you, he said. Yes, I replied. We need you to release the guarantee, he said. I need protection, I replied. What do you want? He asked, irritation barely contained. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was negotiating emotionally, because I was choosing carefully. I want indemnification, I said. In writing, full release, and confirmation that my name is removed from all liabilities. Silence. And he pressed, and in acknowledgement I said, to the bank, that I was never a volunteer. I was integral. That's unnecessary, he snapped. It's accurate, I replied. He exhaled sharply. You're enjoying this? No, I said. I'm finishing what should have been done years ago. We ended the call without agreement, but the power had shifted again. Not dramatically, legally. That night, I sat alone on my couch and felt something unexpected. Not triumph, closure beginning to take shape. They had tried to replace me quietly. They had tried to erase my role, and now the very structures they'd built on my unacknowledged labor were requiring my name to move forward. I wasn't stepping back in. I wasn't fixing anything. I was simply insisting that reality be acknowledged before I let go completely. The final confrontation wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be documented, and that was the kind of ending I could live with. The bank didn't rush. That was the first thing Elaine pointed out when we reviewed the letter together. They don't need to, she said. Time is leverage when you're the one holding the signature. I understood that now, in a way I never had before. For years, I'd been the one speeding things up, smoothing delays, making sure no one else felt the pressure of unfinished business. I had mistaken urgency for responsibility. Now I let things sit. The following week, a second letter arrived. Polite, carefully worded, requesting a meeting. This time, my parents were copied. I forwarded it to Elaine without comment. She replied with a calendar invite of her own, scheduled for the following Thursday. Neutral location, bank counsel, company counsel, my representation. No family-only conversations, no emotional detours. When my mother found out, she called immediately. You're turning this into a spectacle, she said. I'm turning it into a process, I replied. This doesn't need lawyers, she insisted. It needed them years ago, I said. She went quiet, then tried a different angle. Your sister is barely sleeping. I know, I replied. So was I, for a long time. You could end this, she said. Yes, I replied, by being protected, not by disappearing. The meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room, overlooking a parking lot. Unremarkable, intentional. No one felt at home there, which meant no one had the advantage. The bank's attorney spoke first, calm and direct. There is an outstanding personal guarantee connected to the Hawthorne refinancing, he said. Ms. Prescott's name is on it. Any restructuring or sale requires her formal release. My father stiffened. My mother folded her hands tightly. Elaine leaned forward. My client is willing to release the guarantee once she receives full indemnification and written confirmation of liability removal. The company's attorney cleared his throat. That's significant. It's proportional, Elaine replied. The bank attorney nodded. From our perspective, Ms. Prescott's involvement was material. The risk profile changes without her. There it was. Not emotional validation, institutional recognition. My father looked at me, then really looked like he was seeing the outline of something he'd refused to name. "You were never supposed to be this involved," he said quietly. I met his gaze, and yet I was. Silence settled over the table. The negotiation took less than an hour. Indemnification approved. Release drafted. A formal letter to the bank acknowledging my role in structuring the deal and confirming my removal from all future obligations. When the papers were slid across the table, I read every line carefully. Then I signed. The sound of the pen hitting paper felt heavier than I expected. Not because I was losing leverage, because I was letting go of the last thread that tied me to their chaos. After the meeting, my father stopped me in the hallway. "I didn't realize how exposed we were," he said. "I tried to tell you," I replied. "You didn't say it like this," he said. "No," I agreed. I said it quietly. He nodded like that finally made sense. Claire didn't come to the meeting. She texted me afterward. "Is it over?" "For me, yes," I replied. A pause. "I'm thinking about leaving too," she wrote. I didn't tell her what to do. I never had. Just this: whatever you choose, don't choose it out of fear. The weeks that followed were strangely calm. No more calls from attorneys. No more urgent emails. The company began moving toward the wedding and the sale without my involvement. I noticed something else too. My body stopped bracing. I slept through the night. I laughed more easily. I made plans without mentally calculating who might need me to cancel them later. At my new job, a junior manager came to me with a problem she'd been carrying alone.
IT.
I felt a familiar echo, then corrected course. "You don't have to disappear to be competent," I told her. She nodded, relieved. One evening, Claire came over unannounced. Not frantic this time. Thoughtful. "I gave notice," she said. I blinked. "From the company?" She nodded. I told them I needed space. Real space. And I asked. "They panicked," she said. "Then they tried to guilt me. Then they got quiet." I smiled faintly. "That tracks." She looked around my apartment. "You seem different." "I am," I said. "I'm not negotiating my presence anymore." She sat down. "I don't know what comes next." "That's okay," I replied. Neither did I. For the first time in a long while, we sat together without roles pressing in on us. Just two women tired of being useful instead of valued. Later that night, after she left, I stood by my window and watched the city settle into darkness. I thought about the bank meeting, the signatures, the final release. They had tried to replace me quietly. They had tried to take control without conversation. And in the end, the very systems they trusted, more than their own daughter, had forced them to acknowledge the truth. I hadn't won anything. I had reclaimed myself. The next chapter wasn't going to be about fallout. It was going to be about what grows when you stop being managed by people who confuse love with control. And for the first time, that future felt entirely mine to define. The strange thing about walking away cleanly is how much space it leaves behind. Not emptiness, space. By early spring, the distance between my old life and my new one had stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like architecture. Clear lines, load-bearing walls, no hidden cracks disguised as tradition. At work, I was asked to lead a national rollout for a new venue management system. It was complex, high visibility, the kind of project my parents would have quietly handed me years ago, without authority or credit. This time, the authority came first. During the kickoff meeting, someone asked who would be the single point of failure if things went wrong. I didn't hesitate. There won't be one, I said. We build redundancy. The room nodded. No one argued. That still surprised me. Meanwhile, the wedding loomed. I wasn't invited. I found out the date when a vendor accidentally CC'd me on a logistics email. Hawthorne, late October, full buyout. I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message. I didn't feel excluded. I felt released. Claire called a few days later. They're saying you're being dramatic, she said. I smiled faintly. Of course they are. They keep asking if I've talked to you, she added. Like I'm the messenger now. You don't have to be, I said. I know, she replied. I didn't realize how much pressure there always was. There was, I said. You just weren't carrying it. She paused. I don't want to carry it either. That was the most honest thing she'd said in years. The real shift came not from my family, but from someone I hadn't expected. My Aunt Lillian. She'd always been peripheral. Holidays only. Polite distance. I'd assumed she stayed out of things because she didn't care. She invited me to lunch one afternoon. We sat in a small cafe halfway between our apartments. Neutral ground again. I was starting to appreciate how much that mattered. I heard about the bank, she said, without preamble. I raised an eyebrow. News travels. She smiled slightly. Your mother doesn't know I know. I waited. I left the family business years ago, she continued, for the same reasons. That caught my attention. They did the same thing to me, she said. Just slower, softer. By the time I noticed, I was exhausted and convinced it was my fault. I said nothing. I didn't have a lawyer, she added. Or leverage. I just left. She looked at me then. You did it better. I shook my head. I did it later. She nodded. Maybe. But you did it. That conversation settled something inside me. This hadn't started with me. It had just ended with me. At the office, my team started coming to me with concerns they'd been holding quietly. I didn't want to rock the boat, one woman admitted. I leaned back in my chair. Whose boat? She thought about it. I guess. Not mine. Exactly, I said. The language felt familiar for a reason. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. We're finalizing the sale. They want assurances. I stared at the message. What kind, I asked. That there are no outstanding liabilities tied to you. I considered my response carefully. There aren't, I wrote. That's documented. A pause. He replied slower this time. They still ask about you. I read that sentence twice. I imagined him in a conference room, fielding questions he couldn't deflect with charm or tradition. I imagined him having to acknowledge again and again that the person who understood the structure best was no longer there. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt clarity. You should answer honestly, I wrote. It's simpler. He didn't respond. The wedding came and went without incident. No call, no email, no photo sent my way. I spent that weekend hiking with friends somewhere quiet and green. No cell service, no updates. When I came back, my life hadn't changed. That told me everything. The final ripple came a month later. The sale closed. A former colleague texted me a brief update. Lower valuation than expected. Several clauses renegotiated late. A retention bonus for Claire that looked generous, but came with conditions I recognized immediately. Golden handcuffs. I forwarded the message to Claire with one line. Read everything twice. She replied an hour later. I did. Thank you. That was all. At home, I finally took down the last box of paperwork I'd been carrying from apartment to apartment for years. Old contracts, old notes, old versions of myself. I shredded most of it. I kept one thing, a single page, where I'd written years ago, almost as a joke, don't forget who you are without this. I laughed quietly when I found it. I hadn't forgotten. I'd just been buried. The lesson I carried into the next season of my life wasn't dramatic or poetic. It was practical. If people benefit from your silence, they will ask you to keep it. If love requires you to disappear, it isn't love. And if you don't claim your own authority, someone else will assign you a smaller one. I didn't need to confront my family to learn that. I just needed to step out of the role they wrote for me. The tables didn't flip with a crash. They were left behind. And I walked forward, without looking back, finally unencumbered by a story that had never been mine to carry alone. The final chapter wasn't about revenge. It was about ownership of my time, my voice, my future. And nothing they did afterward could take that from me again. The months after the sale felt oddly quiet, like the low hum that follows a storm when you realize the damage has already been done. I wasn't waiting for updates anymore. I wasn't bracing for impact. The distance had settled into something stable, and that stability revealed what had never been stable before. At work, the national rollout moved into its most fragile phase, the kind where small misalignments could cascade into real problems. My team handled it without drama. When something broke, it was logged. When someone needed help, they asked. No one apologized for existing. One afternoon, my boss pulled me aside. "You don't operate like someone who's afraid of being replaced," he said. "I'm not," I replied. He studied me for a moment. That confidence changes how people work around you. I knew what he meant. I'd lived on the other side of it. Claire called one evening later than usual. "They're asking me to sign an amendment," she said. I didn't interrupt. "It ties my bonus to staying through the next restructuring," she continued. "But the language is slippery." "Send it to a lawyer," I said. She hesitated. "They'll take that personally." So I replied. A long pause. "You really don't care what they think anymore," she said. "I care," I answered. "I just don't let it decide for me." She exhaled slowly. "I wish I'd learned that earlier." "You're learning it now," I said. "That counts." A week later, my mother sent me an email. Short, careful. "I hope you're well." The wedding was beautiful. I stared at the words, noticing what wasn't there. No accusation, no request, no attempt to reopen anything. I replied just as briefly, "I'm glad to hear it. I hope you're well too." That exchange marked something subtle but final. They had stopped trying to pull me back in. At Oak Ridge, one of the venues my new company had acquired needed emergency intervention after a management failure. I flew out with 2 team members to stabilize operations. Standing in that empty hall at midnight, reviewing damage reports, I felt a familiar instinct rise. The urge to take it all on myself. I stopped. I delegated. I documented. I went back to the hotel and slept. The next morning, the work continued without me being the axis. Everything spun around. That was the real win. Not that I could handle chaos, but that I no longer had to. The last attempt came quietly, almost politely. A letter from my parents' estate attorney requesting confirmation that I had no further claims or interests related to the former company. Elaine reviewed it and smiled faintly. "They want closure," she said. "So do I," I replied. We sent back a signed statement confirming what had already been documented. No claims, no obligations, no future entanglements. After that, nothing. No calls, no letters, no indirect messages. The silence wasn't cold. It was complete. One evening, I ran into my Aunt Lillian again, this time at a small gathering. She hugged me tightly. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel clearer," I replied. She nodded. "That lasts longer." As winter edged toward spring again, I noticed something I hadn't expected. I stopped telling the story in my head, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined me. The betrayal had been real, the exclusion intentional, the loss undeniable. But it was no longer active. It had done its work, and what remained was something sturdier than revenge. Autonomy. The final chapter wasn't going to arrive with a confrontation or a revelation. It would arrive with a choice I made quietly, and kept making long after no one was watching. And that choice had already changed everything. The invitation arrived without ceremony. A plain envelope. My name typed, not handwritten. No return address I recognized immediately. Inside was a single card. Thanksgiving, this Thursday, dinner at 6. We'd like you there. No apology. No explanation. No pressure spelled out. Just an opening. I didn't respond right away. I set the card on my counter and went about my day. Meetings, calls, decisions that didn't require permission. A life that moved forward, whether or not my family did. That night, I called Elaine. "You don't owe them attendance," she said immediately. "I know," I replied. "And you don't owe them closure," she added. "I know," I said again. She paused. "So what are you deciding?" I looked at the card. "I'm deciding whether going is for them or for me." Thanksgiving came cold and clear. I woke early, not anxious, just thoughtful. By noon, I had my answer. I didn't go. Instead, I hosted dinner at my place. Small, intentional. Friends who knew my story without needing it explained. People who had watched me rebuild quietly. We cooked together, laughed, let silence sit where it belonged. At 6:30, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "They keep asking if you're coming." I replied calmly, "I'm exactly where I need to be." A minute later, "Mom's upset." I didn't respond. That evening, after the dishes were done and the last guest left, I sat alone on my couch with a glass of wine and felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace without permission. The next morning, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief. "We were hoping you'd come. We miss you." I didn't doubt that they did. But missing someone isn't the same as respecting them. A week later, Claire came by. She looked steadier than I'd ever seen her. I signed with an exit clause, she said, sitting across from me. "A real one." I smiled. "Good." "They didn't like it," she added. "I'm sure," I said. She hesitated. "They say you've changed." I met her eyes. "Have you?" She thought for a moment. "Yes." "Then that's the difference," I replied. She nodded slowly. "I think they're starting to understand what they lost." I didn't correct her. Loss was their lesson, not mine. The last real confrontation never happened. No shouting, no dramatic reckoning. Just distance, solidifying into boundaries no one could cross without my consent. At work, I was offered a promotion I hadn't chased. Expanded scope, clear authority. A team that trusted my judgment without needing me to prove it every day. When I signed the contract, I noticed my hand. My hand didn't shake. That mattered. One afternoon, I walked past a mirror in a hallway and caught my own reflection. I looked, grounded, not hardened, not cold, defined. I thought about the girl I'd been standing in my parents' kitchen with a casserole no one had asked for, realizing she'd already been replaced. She hadn't been weak. She'd just been loyal in a system that rewarded silence. I wish I could tell her what I know now. That love without choice is control. That family isn't supposed to cost you your voice. That walking away doesn't mean you failed. It means you listened. The final chapter wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be clean. And I was ready to close it on my terms. The last shift didn't arrive with drama. It arrived on an ordinary morning when I realized I wasn't bracing for anything anymore. No checking my phone before I even got out of bed. No low tension in my shoulders. No quiet rehearsal of conversations that might never happen. I stood in my kitchen with coffee cooling in my hands and understood with a kind of calm certainty that my body had finally accepted what my mind already knew. I was safe, not protected by anyone else, not tolerated, not needed in exchange for belonging. Safe because I had chosen myself and built a life that didn't require my silence to function. At work, the promotion settled into routine. Authority without theatrics. Responsibility shared instead of hoarded. When problems arose, they were addressed openly, not quietly redirected toward the same person out of habit. One afternoon, A junior manager asked me how I learned to set boundaries so clearly. I didn't learn it early, I said. I learned it thoroughly. She smiled, like that answer meant more than I'd intended. Claire and I found a new rhythm. Not close, not distant. Honest. She stopped calling me when she wanted reassurance and started calling when she wanted perspective. Sometimes she didn't call at all, and that told me she was learning to stand on her own. My parents stayed in their lane. Occasional updates, neutral messages, no more requests disguised as concern. They had stopped trying to rewrite the past. I think finally they understood they couldn't. One evening, I opened a box I'd carried through 3 apartments without ever unpacking. Old files, notes, things I thought I might need someday. I didn't. I recycled most of it. I kept one page, a handwritten list from years ago, tucked between contracts and schedules. Don't forget who you are when this is over. I laughed quietly when I read it. I hadn't forgotten. I had been delayed. The revenge I once imagined never happened. There was no public reckoning, no apology that arrived too late, no moment where everyone finally admitted they were wrong. And I didn't need any of that, because the real reversal of power wasn't watching them struggle. It was watching myself stop shrinking. I stopped explaining my decisions. I stopped absorbing discomfort to keep others comfortable. I stopped negotiating my worth with people who benefited from undervaluing it. I didn't win by staying longer. I won by leaving intact. If you're listening to this and something feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not selfish for wanting clarity. You are not disloyal for setting boundaries. And you are not dramatic for noticing when love turns into control. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting back. It's stepping away and building something better without asking permission. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like, comment, or subscribe. Share it with someone who's carrying more than they should. Someone who's been called strong when what they really needed was support. Your story matters, and you are allowed to choose yourself, even when the people who taught you loyalty never taught you how to let go.